The $90 billion gas deal nobody's talking about. In September 2025, Russia and China stood in front of cameras and signed a deal for the biggest gas pipeline ever proposed between the two countries. 50 billion cubic meters a year, 30 years. Enough to reroute a huge chunk of Russia's entire energy future away from Europe and toward Asia. 10 months later, Chinese officials quietly told their Russian counterparts not to even bring it up at their next meeting. That's not how no-limits partnerships are supposed to work. So what actually happened in between? To understand it, you have to go back to the pipeline that came before it, the one that already proved this partnership could work. For most of the last 50 years, Russian gas had one real customer: Europe. Pipelines ran west, money flowed back, and that was the arrangement. But China was changing faster than almost any economy in history. Hundreds of millions of people moved into cities. Factories multiplied, and all of it ran on coal that was choking the country's own skylines. Beijing needed a cleaner fuel, and it needed a lot of it. By 2024, China was burning through more than 400 billion cubic meters of natural gas a year, according to Chinese energy authorities, and it couldn't produce nearly enough at home to keep up. Here's the problem. Most of the gas China imports to fill that gap arrives by ship, as LNG, squeezing through the Strait of Malacca, a stretch of water so narrow that a single blockade could choke a quarter of the world's trade in an afternoon. For a country planning decades ahead, that's not a supply chain. It's a vulnerability. Russia had the opposite problem. It held one of the largest gas reserves on Earth, sitting in Siberia, with nowhere to sell it except a European market that was about to turn hostile. Two countries, two problems that canceled each other out. In May 2014, in the same season Russia annexed Crimea and Western sanctions started piling up, Gazprom and China's CNPC signed a $400 billion 30-year contract. 38 billion cubic meters of gas every year for 3 decades. It remains one of the largest energy agreements ever signed. On paper, that sounds simple. In practice, it meant building one of the most extreme engineering projects on the planet. The pipeline, called Power of Siberia, starts at gas fields in the Republic of Sakha, a region so remote that winter temperatures regularly drop below -50 degrees Celsius. Engineers had to build roads before they could even bring in machinery to lay pipe. Much of the ground is permafrost, meaning the earth itself can shift with temperature changes. Bury a pipeline carelessly, and the soil could eventually tear it apart. So they built specialized foundations and monitoring systems designed specifically to survive the Arctic. From there, the pipeline crosses the Amur River into China, feeds into a processing plant that strips out valuable byproducts like helium, and connects to a Chinese pipeline network stretching thousands of kilometers further, all the way to industrial hubs near Shanghai. Gas started flowing in December 2019. Then, on December 1, 2024, 7 months ahead of schedule, Gazprom announced the pipeline had hit its full contracted capacity. 38 billion cubic meters a year, flowing daily into Chinese cities that, a decade earlier, had never received a single molecule of Russian gas directly. The ambition didn't stop there. If Power of Siberia was the proof of concept, Power of Siberia 2 was supposed to be the main event. This time, the gas wouldn't come from new eastern fields built specifically for China. It would come from the Yamal Peninsula in western Siberia, the same massive reserves that, for decades, fed Europe. The plan? Redirect a huge share of that gas east instead, through a new pipeline crossing Mongolia, delivering up to 50 billion cubic meters a year. Combined with the original pipeline, that's nearly 90 billion cubic meters of Russian gas flowing into China annually, enough to make China, not Germany, Russia's most important gas customer on Earth. For Russia, this wasn't just a business opportunity, it was a lifeline. Since 2022, Russian pipeline exports to Europe have collapsed by roughly 90%, and the European Union has committed to phasing out Russian LNG entirely by the end of 2026. Yamal's gas needed somewhere to go. So, in September 2025, Putin and Gazprom signed that memorandum. The route was agreed, through Mongolia's Soyuz-Vostok corridor. The scale was agreed, up to 50 billion cubic meters. What wasn't in that agreement was the price. And that's where things started to unravel. According to reporting from the Wall Street Journal and other outlets through mid-2026, China has been pushing for a price close to what Gazprom charges inside Russia itself, a heavily subsidized domestic rate. For Gazprom, accepting that would mean the entire upstream investment in Yamal's fields might never pay for itself. Russian officials have reportedly floated the idea that Power of Siberia 2's price simply cannot go below what China already pays for the first pipeline. China, for its part, has leverage it didn't have back in 2014. Russia now has far fewer buyers for this gas than it used to, and Beijing knows it. By July 2026, that gap had widened into a standoff serious enough that Chinese representatives reportedly asked Moscow to keep the topic off the agenda for a high-level meeting in Beijing. Some analysts now describe the negotiations as effectively frozen, not canceled, but not moving either. So why does a stalled pipeline deal matter to anyone outside Moscow or Beijing? Because it's a preview of something much bigger, the terms on which the world's energy map gets redrawn. If Russia successfully pivots tens of billions of cubic meters of gas from Europe to China, it reshapes gas prices, shipping routes, and investment decisions from Qatar to Texas. American LNG exporters in particular are watching closely to see whether a flooded Chinese pipeline market makes their own multi-billion-dollar projects harder to finance. If the deal collapses instead, that Siberian gas has nowhere obvious to go, and Russia's bet on Asia replacing Europe starts to look a lot shakier. 10 years ago, the idea that Russia would need China more than China needed Russia would have sounded backwards. Today, the country holding one of the largest gas reserves on the planet is negotiating for a price and waiting for an answer.